Never have I seen someone solidify their place in the UFC Hall of Fame as quickly and as emphatically as Alex Pereira, right? We're coming off of the weekend where Alex P just defended his belt once again in a rematch against Jiří Procházka. And if you remember rightly, the first fight was kind of competitive, man, and it had kind of a controversial finish, right? A lot of people would have ideally preferred to have maybe seen it go on a little longer. Because of that, there were still like these question marks, people saying that, you know, Herb got a bit overzealous, he jumped in too early, maybe Jiří could have survived that, because he was, you know, I think he had gotten guard by the time that finish was really coming to an end. And, you know, maybe if Jiří could have survived that, he could have gone on to make that fight competitive again, as it was before that had happened, right, before he got caught. And frankly, it's hard to kind of argue with that, because it was a very early stoppage, and because it was so competitive before that, you know, I understand why there are question marks there, right? But after their rematch this time around over the weekend, my God, Alex Pereira just silenced all doubters. And as a Jiří fan, it kind of hurts my feelings, because, I mean, I'm just such a fan of his style, right? He's such a unique character, both him and Alex, that you can't help but root for them. And so to see Alex do what he did to Jiří over the weekend, which was absolutely dominate him, wasn't competitive for even a moment, dropped him at the end of the first, got him out of there at the beginning of the second, just like that, done. It hurts me to see that happen to a guy like Jiří, and to see him sad in the cage afterwards. It kind of sucks. And you see him afterwards speaking about how, you know, he needs to evolve as a fighter, or he's not going to continue to do this. And while I would certainly agree, I would be interested to see how that looks, because Jiří fights the same every goddamn time, right? Every goddamn time. Before we talk more about Jiří, let's continue on with Alex Pereira, who has impressed me and the rest of the world continuously since he made his debut. And it's crazy the way this guy just continues to go out there and not just like win, but do it just so fucking impressively and on short notice, after already saving UFC 300 like not long before that, right? He rocked up to fight Jiří now with like 2 broken toes that weren't already properly healed from the last time he did it against Jamahal. And he's just like, yeah, cool story. Wait, switch kick to the dome, sends him down to the ground, and then just casually like pops his toes back into place afterwards like it's no big deal. You know what I mean? These aren't normal antics. You know what I mean? This is rare that we see a man like this doing the things he's doing as easy as he's doing it. It's fucking crazy. And I hope people that are watching this guy can like really smell the roses in that moment. You know what I mean? And appreciate him now, because a lot of the time fighters, it's the same in a lot of industries. Like I think of like music artists as well. A lot of them don't get the flowers they deserve while they're here. You know, it definitely happens in MMA all the time as well. I think of like guys like Michael Bisping as a perfect example, who while they were competing didn't really get a lot of the love, but once they retired, you know, people really can appreciate more the run that they had. And thankfully, Alex Pereira, I see, is getting a lot of love, and it's well deserved, because the guy's not even had 10 fucking fights, man. That was his 9th fight in the UFC. Absolutely crazy. I think he's maybe had like 13 professional bouts or something, but in the UFC, less than 10. It's fucking remarkable, right? Let's just go over what he's done, right? He ended Izzy's streak, which was like, you know, that was Izzy. That was prime Izzy before he had taken an L. Maybe might have lost to Jan actually in a decision before that. But either or, like no one had came close to like doing what Alex Pereira did to him in that 5th round. And he did that after like what, 3 or 4 fights in the UFC. He also has that victory over Sean Strickland, which is just aging like wine, because Sean just continues to improve and do really well against the elite in the division. We just saw him against Paulo, and you know, people argued it wasn't the most entertaining fight, but you also can't deny that Sean dominates that fight, right? Like that was a clear victory for Sean. And so that's a victory for Alex Pereira that is just continuing to age really well. You know, he went up in weight to light heavyweight. He's now defended that belt twice. He beat Jan, which Izzy couldn't do. He's just really exceeded everyone's expectations. You know, when you go see a specialist come into the sport, unless they're a grappler, you kind of tend to think they're going to get found out in the UFC, right? They're going to get taken down, put on their back, and they're going to get a real rude awakening. Not Alex Pereira, man. And actually, to think that he has his, you know, everyone kind of scoffed when he got his black belt in jiu-jitsu. I see a lot of footage of him grappling with really good guys, and I see him doing well. And so I think perhaps his grappling is underrated. I know we've seen him like in his fight against Izzy gets him down, and because of that people think, oh well, if Izzy's taking you down, he must have bad wrestling. Not necessarily, man. He's a lanky guy with long limbs. He's really effective in the grappling sequences that people don't maybe give enough credit for. So just to summarize, I think Alex Pereira is a fucking G, and you know, we're hearing rumors now about him wanting to fight like at heavyweight, right? You know, we're like fantasizing about matchups with him and John Jones, Tom Aspinall, who's a guy he's been looking at for a long time. And let's make it abundantly fucking clear that both of those matchups, John Jones and Tom Aspinall, on paper are terrible matchups for Alex Pereira, because these are guys who are obviously massive, like these are big dudes, especially Tom Aspinall, that move really well, have great grappling, and of course, it goes without saying, hit like a fucking Mack truck. But with all of that I just said being true, I still want to see it, because Alex Pereira at this point has got enough favour with the UFC and as well as us, the fans, that how could we dare doubt him? You know what I mean? He's been up against the odds since his first fight in the UFC, and he continues to shine more and more and more each time we see him. So if he wants to go up and fight Tom Aspinall, let's fucking do it. I've already seen an interview of Tom Aspinall saying he's open to the idea. What are we doing here? Tom Aspinall versus Alex Pereira. Winner fights John Jones. And just on that small glimmer of hope that Alex Pereira gets it fucking done against Tom Aspinall, a fight versus him and John Jones might just be top 3 biggest fights the UFC's ever put on. I swear to God, because Alex Pereira has really solidified himself as, like, of course he's got his place in the Hall of Fame pretty much solidified, like I mentioned earlier, but he's arguably right now top 3 on the pound for pound list. He's in the GOAT argument already, okay? So I think John Jones would look at a fight against him as brilliant business, and also on paper, I know I keep saying that, on paper, a good matchup for John. You know, he's thinking I can take him down and get him out of there, which is probably what would happen. It's kind of crazy how Alex Pereira, in just literally 9 fights, like maybe 2.5, 3 years with the company, has become the face of the UFC. It's fucking incredible. And so I just want to continue to see where his path takes him. I'm all for the Tom Aspinall fight. I think if you're the UFC, make that fight happen, especially considering Aspinall is open to it. That's a big fight in its own right. Of course, Aspinall needs to get past Curtis Blades, that's kind of a tough matchup. If I'm the UFC, I'm keeping Curtis Blades far away from Alex Pereira, even though Alex Pereira does have it in him to catch him as well, because he can just put anyone out. I think UFC needs to strike when the iron's hot, right? And right now that iron is boiling hot, like. Alex Pereira is there. I think if Tom Aspinall makes it through Curtis Blades, we need to make that fight for, like, before the year is over. You know what I mean? That's what's next for Alex Pereira in my mind. I know that they're saying maybe he could fight Ankalaev at light heavyweight, and I think Ankalaev probably deserves that fight, and if they made that fight next, then sure, that makes a lot of sense. You can't really argue with it, but then you're putting at risk those 2 massive fights against Aspinall and John Jones, because again, Ankalaev, similar to those guys on paper, isn't a great matchup. Of course, I don't doubt Pereira anymore. I would never see him as the underdog ever again. I think he's got something in him that just makes him different. He can beat anyone on any given night. But if you're the UFC, do you really want to risk those super fights by putting him in there against Ankalaev? You know, these are businessmen at the end of the day. It doesn't make the most business sense. But moving on from Alex Pereira, I think I've kissed enough ass for now. Let me kiss on to another ass. Jiří Procházka, right? I mentioned earlier how sad I was to see him after the loss this time around. But man, let's just talk about his style, right? I've never seen someone gauge distance with their fucking face, with their forehead. Like most guys, you know, you go long guard, you feel him out. This guy's like, this is how he gauges this, both hands behind his back. It's crazy, like, I've never seen anyone do it before. And like, he's like trying to headbutt your fist, which is all gravy, but you can't do that with Alex Pereira. You know what I mean? Maybe, you know, you see against Rakic, same thing. He just eats shots like it's fucking breakfast. Can't do that against Alex Pereira. And I think, defensively speaking, there are so many holes in Jiří's game because of how his style is, but because of how it's like that argument, that old age argument of technique versus effectiveness. On paper, I've said this so many times already, on paper, technically speaking, a lot of what Jiří does is just wrong. You know what I mean? But it's fucking effective. But stylistically speaking, against a guy like Alex Pereira, who has just ungodly power, it's a rough matchup. I think we want to keep Jiří around the top, right? Because Jiří, like I said, Yuri's a character that everyone's come to really fall in love with. He's so unique. I love the whole like traditional samurai mindset. I just love that shit. How he lives his life is just so interesting to me. There are matchups for him at light heavyweight that are favourable, you know what I mean? I'm thinking we could put him in there against Jamahal. That'd be fun. Again, because of the holes in Yuri's game defensively, these are all guys who crack so hard that Jiří, you know, Yuri's always going to be up against it. We might see him take a loss because of how his style is, right? Like, it's a bit of a roll in the dice. But actually, you know, I was looking at his record the other day and I was fucking really impressed that, like, I'm pretty sure like 98% of his fights are finishes. Like, he might have 1 or 2 decisions out of his whole career. He just puts guys out, and I think it's because he just like, you can't just like slowly pick him apart from the outside. He forces you into a car crash of a fight every single time, because he's either in the pocket or he's right on the outside, but he's putting his fucking face right within your range, like inviting you to punch him, and then he's just with all these weird angles, like almost like windmills, he's clocking you on the inside as you like close the distance on your way to the inside. Really impressive. So yeah, matchups for him are light heavyweight. Let's think. Jamahal Hill would be fun. Frankly, I think that's probably the fight to make, Jamahal Hill in a main event. Let Jamahal Hill rest up. I forget why he pulled out of his last fight. But yeah, Jiří Procházka versus Jamahal Hill. That makes all the sense in the fucking world, right? Because then if either one of those guys wins, especially Jamahal, I know he's talking a lot of shit about wanting to fight Alex Pereira again. If he goes out there and beats Jiří, especially finishes Jiří, you know, that's a conversation that we could have about Jamahal getting that rematch with Alex Pereira. I'd be interested in that. Why not? I think, again, if I'm the UFC, I'm not listening to any of that. I'm just throwing Alex in there with Tom Aspinall right now for the interim and hoping that we can get a fight between him and John Jones, but it's whatever. Back to Jiří one more time. I hope the guy, again, about like giving people their roses while they're still here, he's a guy who I hope to God people remain on this level of like giving him the respect he deserves, because the thing that I hate about MMA is the fans, for the most part, are so fickle. You know what I mean? Like, we can be in love with a fighter thinking that he's the best thing we've ever seen. He takes one loss and all of a sudden he's terrible. I haven't been paying much attention, but I would imagine there are a lot of people right now shitting on Jiří Procházka and his style and saying how, you know, he's garbage or whatever. Of course, I don't agree with that. I find it so frustrating. But I think we'll see Jiří at the top. I think within the next couple of years we'll see him in another title fight, frankly, because I think Alex Pereira, he's getting on a bit now. He's like, what, 37? He's not going to be around forever. Jiří, I think at light heavyweight we'll see him with gold wrapped around his waist once again. As for future UFC events, I was looking at this as well the other day. It's fucking sad. The next 2, maybe 3 weeks of UFC sucks. We've got I think we've got 2 main events, both female main events, which makes me sound like a sexist pig, but you know how that goes. Unless your name's like Valentina or like Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Amanda Nunes, you know, the creme de la creme, I'm not really interested in seeing it. Although, that reminds me, Michelle Waterson retired against Gillian Robertson the other night on the same UFC card, I believe, as Alex Pereira. And Gillian Robertson is a woman who I'm a big fucking fan of, man, because she's a finisher and she's the nicest lady in the whole wide world. But she beat the dog shit out of Michelle Waterson, and it was sad to see her, or Michelle Gomez, whatever her name is now, she's been married. So she's retired. I think she went like 1-7 in her last 8 fights, you know what I mean, which is rough. And then she had like this whole, you know, retirement package laid out for her by the UFC, which was great. I really like it when they do that. But on the same card, Andrei Arlovski fought his last fight for the UFC and he didn't get any shine whatsoever, which I wonder why. I don't understand why that is. I think that's because he has openly said he's not retiring, he's just at the end of his contract and he's going to go and fight elsewhere. And you know, the UFC are spiteful little bastards, and so I think they thought, if he's not going to retire and he's going to go and fight somewhere else, we're not going to give him that shine, which is fucked, because the guy's been fighting for the UFC for literally like a quarter century or some shit like that, like 25 years. Former heavyweight champion of the world, like maybe 2 or 3 time heavyweight champ, something crazy. I might have just made that up, but he's definitely been heavyweight champ before my day. Deserves some love on the way out the door, is basically what I'm saying, and he didn't get any. So I'm hoping that maybe after the fact they can, I don't know, he deserves some shine. Like, give the guy a fucking interview at the bare minimum. Let's hear about this guy's story. I don't know, he's been with fucking UFC for 25 years and they didn't even give him a pat on the back on the way out, you know what I mean? Don't get it. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of the MMA show this time around, guys. Perhaps won't be doing one of these for a little while just because of how lackluster the UFC events are coming up, unless something really pops off in the news. But frankly, something usually does, so I'm sure I'll see you sooner rather than later.